Good afternoon. Did you know that Jeffco Schools is hiding that it is going to shortchange the bond program by $14.5 million in promised capital transfer funds? Probably not. Let's take a look at how Copeland is playing a financial shell game in hiding the fact that Jeffco will not make the promised $138 million in capital transfer contributions to the capital improvement program. In 2018, Jeffco very clearly told taxpayers that $23 million annually for 6 years, or a total of $138 million, would be contributed to the capital improvement program through capital transfer to help pay for the projects outlined in the flipbook. Or from a February 2023 presentation to the board. The problem, however, was that this promise was a lie. The full $23 million was never available. This was due to the fact that $2.1 million in annual COP payments also came out of the annual capital transfer. Jeffco knew this. We can see this in an April 2020 CAP report, only a year and a half after the bond was passed. Only $20.9 million out of the promised $23 million annually for the first year was getting transferred into the SIP. This was also verified in the late 2020 Askelson report, where the former CFO clearly stated that Jeffco was trending toward a $12.6 million shortfall. And here's Reed's October 7th board presentation validating Askelson's statement. After this, things continue on as expected up through September 2020. Jeffco had, at that point, made two $20.9 million transfers for a total of $40.8 million, telling the CAC that those transfers were for fiscal years 2020 and 2021. Things started to get a little funny, though, the next month when the CAC was suddenly told that a fiscal year 19 transfer of $9.5 million was made. How does that happen 16 months after the end of fiscal year 19? The answer, though, appeared in the same Askelson report that we saw earlier. The same one Askelson had noted that there was going to be a $12.6 million shortfall. In her report, she is stating that $9.5 million in 19M projects were moved into the bond program. She goes on to state, the $9.5 million in funds were not included in the estimates for funding sources in the amount of capital transfer dedicated to the bond program needed to be increased for those projects. We see that increase in the October CAC report, where capital revenues increased by $9.5 million. Remember, this is the same document that she confirms a $12.6 million capital transfer shortfall. She didn't decrease the shortfall by $9.5 million in the document. She made it perfectly clear that the addition of the $9.5 million in 19M projects came with their own separate $9.5 million increase in funding. Things continue on as expected with the CAP reports up through September 2022, where we see 3 years of $20.9 million annual capital transfers plus the $9.5 million increase for the 19M projects. You can also see that the projected contributions for fiscal year 23, 24, and 25 have decreased to only $19 million per year because payments for Myers Pool are now also coming out of the yearly capital transfer, further increasing the shortfall from what was originally promised. There is a change in October 2022 where a board-approved one-time $5 million transfer from fiscal year 22 general fund was made into the bond program to cover increased costs of Jeffco Net. But from a February 2023 presentation, we can see that this also was not meant for anything other than to cover increasing the scope of work of Jeffco Net that was going to be covered and/or managed by the bond program. Note this slide specifically states that the annual transfer excludes the one-time Jeffco Net $5 million transfer from the general fund, not to mention the continuing deception relating to the annual $23 million transfer. So to recap, in February 2023, Jeffco is telling the CAC that projections are that Jeffco will put $136.7 million into the bond program from transfers. However, we know that $14.5 million of that is from one-time, specially earmarked projects. Therefore, at that point, Jeffco was on track to contribute $122.2 million of the promised $138 million in annual transfers, a now $15.8 million shortfall. Once again, everything seemed okay until Copeland began to sling the real deception and bullshit in the June 2023 budget presentation. This is just an incredible slide. First, Copeland is trying to tell the board to believe that capital transfers into the SIP began in fiscal year 19 with a contribution of over $24 million and will extend 6 years to the end of fiscal year 24. This slide is just an egregious attempt to mislead and deceive. First, Copeland is attempting to get people to believe that the promised $23 million annual capital transfer contributions for the SIP began in 2019. That is absolutely false. We know that the bond wasn't passed until partway through fiscal year 19, so contributions weren't included in that year's budget. Secondly, we've already seen months and months of the CAP report that didn't include any fiscal year 19 contributions. Copeland is just deceptively revising history here. Second, at best, she is attempting to confuse people by conflating total revenue into the Capital Reserve Fund with promised capital transfer into the SIP. They are completely different. While total capital transfer, interest, and other revenue amounts into the Capital Reserve Fund may total $149 million from fiscal year 19 to 24, total contributions to the SIP through fiscal year 24 are going to be much, much less. Take, for example, the end of fiscal year 23, for which we have complete data. Total contributions into the SIP were only $97 million, and that includes 14.5 in total 19M and Jeffco net earmarks. So actual capital transfers into the SIP for the first 4 years only totaled $82.7 million, certainly not the $129 million that Copeland hoped people believed. Then suddenly, in June 2023, a capital contributions resolution appears buried amidst the numerous documents relating to approving the fiscal year 23-24 budget, stating that Jeffco is committed to ensuring that $138 million in supplemental, note, not capital transfer, funds are available to the SIP. Did anyone ever wonder why this resolution suddenly appeared? Is it nothing more than a cover your ass for what is about to happen next? It certainly seems that way. With the passing of this resolution, all attempts at transparency disappeared. Here you can see between August 2023 and March 2024, all references to the 19M and Jeffco projects were dropped from the CAP report. And we can see that the label was changed from capital transfer to additional contributions. To put icing on this little cake of deception and to avoid any questions and suspicion, the total amount of contributions was also changed to an even $138 million. And just like that, Jeffco hid the fact that they were going to be $14.5 million short in fulfilling their promise to taxpayers to contribute $23 million each for 6 years in general fund transfers to the bond program. It is bad enough that Jeffco was going to be short in delivering on their $138 million promise to voters, but it is beyond egregious that district staff took such blatant and calculated steps to hide that fact and attempt to fool the board and the community. The Capital Improvement Program has been a financial, transparency, and ethical disaster from the very beginning. It is no wonder that staff and the board want to keep the true facts from the public. Leadership continues to fail to hold the responsible parties accountable and bring all the issues to light by conducting performance and forensic financial audits as recommended by the first Moss-Adams report. As a taxpayer and someone who voted for the bond, I feel that I was lied to and taken advantage of. That makes me angry. The lack of integrity in the manner this has been handled has been appalling. There's no excuse for what has transpired here, and I will never again vote for another bond or mill because I just can't trust Jeffco.